Hi guys, it's Kim. Everything's moving around here. Everybody's set. Sorry, I just knocked into something and everything started moving. So hi, welcome to the live stream. I'm going to move you a little bit away from me because I'm not quite centered. So okay, not that I'm ever centered. So yeah, Crazy Kim is here with you tonight. A little hormonal, a little tired, a little allergy-ish, a little broken out, a little everything that made me think uh, I should cancel. I should really cancel the live because nobody wants to see me today. You know, when I was younger, do you guys know, like, is this a 40s thing? You guys tell me. I'm like actually looking myself in the screen right now. I look perfectly normal. And yet today there was this voice in my head that was like, and it's not just today, but it was like, um, you know how you have a bad hair day? I was like, does anyone ever feel like you have a bad face day? This started happening to me in my late, like, just this year, I think, really. Like, I mean, it's not like I'm always like feeling like the most beautiful woman in the world. This is not for compliments. I'm just sharing the mental space I'm in. But then it's like, you start aging and your face is aging and you wake up like puffier or something. And I was like, what do I do in my sleep sometimes? I don't understand how there's like a new wrinkle or something. Anyway, I didn't do that to get sympathy. I just kind of did that to say, like, I'm insane. Welcome to my life. Anyway, so how's everybody doing? It's Tuesday. I'm here. I went to the gym this morning. I'm on a roll. I don't know. You can see I have some muscle. I also have some hanging. So, see, but if I do that, you can actually see that my bicep does something. It's exciting. Anyway. And I can start to feel the muscles in my legs. I mean, so some things are happening. It's very challenging. I was talking about this. I actually joined a class about like more to get just more advanced training around some things around weightlifting. Because I actually have done weightlifting at various times in my past, but I wanted to get a deeper understanding of some things. Maybe I'll include some weightlifting information in my next program, right? So I better get better trained and better understand it. And some people that I'm working with, Rachel Gregory, who's awesome, was like, I think you're lifting too light, like lift heavier. And I was lifting pretty heavy, like pretty darn heavy, in my mind, not my arms, but my legs. And then I was like, okay, mm, I did, and so it seems to be working. So, I find she and I are having discussions. I think a lot of people out there in the world are doing, are not doing weightlifting when they should be doing weightlifting, period. And then there are a lot of people who think they're doing weightlifting, but they're really doing more of cardio while holding weights, and they're not really going to get the muscle development they ever want. So I want to fix that. I want that to get fixed, and apparently it's me. I was like, I texted her, I was like, who does a good beginners program for people who really are kind of a little intimidated and yada yada? And she's like, you? I don't know. Maybe. Okay. So that's just a thought in my head this week. Like, I need a title that's like the unlikeliest trainer ever. Really, truly. Okay. So I thought I would open the show with all of my insecurities and share them with you. No, I thought I would open the show in my class, Keto Unstuck. Someone asked what my thoughts were on the protein sparing modified fast. And I've talked about it before on these lives, but I thought I could go into it again because it comes up so often. And then two for one, because people who want to know about it for my class can know about it too. So just give you a little backstory. Maybe you guys know this one. But if you're ever on a quiz show, this could be very useful. I always like to know the history. I hope you like to know the history too, because it makes life a lot like I get things better. Um, so the protein sparing modified fast was created in what decade, people? In the 1970s. In the 1970s, and it was created by a guy named George Blackburn, and it was created as something called the last chance diet. And I'm not sure if the last chance referred to it's your last chance, before we have to send you for weight loss surgery, or like just like your last chance because you're going to die. I don't know, but it was the last chance diet. And it was a crash diet, is how I would describe it. It was designed to be somewhere like 600 to 800 calories. It was, so a lot of people, the modern version of the protein sparing modified fast, um, is more, a little more high protein. But this is, I'm first, this is the original version. I'll move forward in time. So when you um, did this, you did it with minimal protein, but enough protein that you were meeting the threshold for your lean body mass to be supported. So the idea behind it really was, well, you can see if you just restrict everyone from eating at all, like no food, fasting, period, they lose a lot of weight, but they lose both muscle and body fat on those kinds of very long fasts. So they're like, whether they were like, well, how do we mitigate that? So the idea of protein sparing was spare the body's protein, spare the muscle, spare the lean body mass by giving people just enough protein that they don't lose as much lean body mass, the muscle, bone, skin, hair, that kind of thing. So it's a very, very low calorie diet, almost exclusively protein, as little carbs and fat as you can get away with giving somebody, that comes just like trace amounts in meat. And in fact, the original version of the diet was a liquid diet for the most part. There was a refeeding section, but was a liquid diet. Hey, Gene, was a liquid diet. And so the problem was they didn't properly supplement people's electrolytes as well as some other things they needed. And the form of protein that they often relied on for this diet was collagen protein. And who knows the problem there? Collagen protein is not a complete protein. And so 17 people actually died, because if you put somebody on a insufficient electrolyte, vitamin and mineral, liquid, incomplete protein diet for months on end, you'll kill them. So that's bad. Um, so they kind of stopped being popular for a while after that. And then Lyle McDonald sort of brought them back, I think in the 1990s. Lyle McDonald is a big guy in the bodybuilding community and does nutrition and training stuff. And he brought it back and he called it the modified protein sparing modified diet. And he had a couple of things that made it healthier, one of which he said you have to rely, I mean, you can use a little bit of protein shake, but you should rely primarily on whole, real sources of food. He allowed more leafy greens for more minerals there. He supplemented some omega-6, I'm sorry, some omega-3 fats. He said people should have a little bit of fat. And he supplemented some other things. And he said, he called it like no ifs, ands, or buts. He said, this is a crash diet and generally a bad idea for people. He said he would reserve it for like starting a fat loss phase when you need a jump start, or if you're like a show competitor, you have a, like so like very, very heavy or very, very lean, and you're just doing it for a little while to get ready for like a photo shoot or something like that. And so his was, just a few weeks maybe, as an approach. It's been brought into sort of more of the keto community, although Lyle wrote a book called The Ketogenic Diet. He's not a current ketogenic type person, but he clearly acknowledged this was a ketogenic diet. Oh, and he upped the protein. So it was more protein. It was more of a high protein diet than just a moderate, adequate protein diet like the original version. But it's been brought back into the sort of attention of people, specifically in the keto community, through probably Maria Emmerich. And I think Keto Gains also, but Maria Emmerich, when she started making recipes for the protein sparing modified fast, definitely brought that forward. And so it's become sort of a sensation, which is why people have probably questions about whether I think it's a good idea. Now, most people that I know these days, which includes like Rachel Gregory, who I mentioned earlier, she's not primarily keto anymore, but she's a low carb supporting, keto supporting fitness person. She does more metabolic flexibility concepts these days. use the protein sparing modified fast. Also, um, in Maria's and Craig's influence, they don't use it as a do it for several weeks diet. They use it as a do it 1 or 2 days a week diet. That was a bad grammar. 1 or 2 days a week diet, maybe 3 at most. The idea being that you would it's averaging out to a lower caloric intake over the course of the week. So, let's say you normally eat, these are not recommended numbers, everybody. If you normally eat 2,000 calories a day, so your total calories for the week would be 14,000 calories, right? 2 times 7 is 14. So maybe you're like, well, I could either choose to lower my daily caloric intake to lose weight, or I could leave my caloric intake where it's at 5 days a week and lower it 2 days a week so that at the end of the week, my average is still down. They're just two different ways to skin the cat, basically. Not that you want to skin a cat, but you know the expression, right? So it kind of depends on your personality. So I'm against long-term use of protein sparing modified fast. I just think they make people crazy as a bed bug. Um, I think if you want to implement them 1, 2, maybe up to 3 days a week because they work out better for you, that like there are a couple days a week where like I work all day and I don't eat very much and I'm okay not eating very much. And but a couple days a week I want to eat a little more. So they're just different approaches. Really, ultimately, in my opinion, what matters is what your week averages out. Personally, for me, I much prefer to average lower every day rather than higher. So, well, I mean, I do fluctuate a little bit, but I'm not happy on a protein sparing modified fast level of caloric intake, even for a day. So I would rather average that pain out throughout the week. So rather than one day where I'm eating 800 calories, I'm eating, you know, 1,600 calories every day rather than 2,000, right? So I'm just like, I'll just take that down slightly so it averages out the same. So I think really if it works for you depends very much upon your personality and how you like to eat and whether you're better with like every day is a little bit lower, but it's never really low, or you're like, meh, sometimes I'm fine with just like all meat all day, all lean meat all day, chicken, 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 blank steak, blank steak, blank steak, and then other days I can be a little more adventurous. Um, so that's really it. I mean, it's not magic. It's just which way do you like to live? It's great to have the option though, because maybe you're like, I don't know, something's happening on Saturday and you think I want to be able to really go to town on Saturday a little bit more. So I'm gonna do a protein sparing modified fast on like, you know, I always say you do it in advance. Don't do it on the far end. Don't do it as a punishment. Do it as in preparation, right? So, maybe on Thursday you're like, I'm going to want to have kind of a leaner day and then but it's really all just about averaging out your week. So it's a method to average out your week. So I'm not against it in that way but I would not suggest it as a long-term, meaning more than a couple of days here and there, solution. I just think it is insufficient for anyone to eat. Anyway, so that's what I mean, so people are always I guess I'm like, it's sort of like asking me like, do I think that you might want to eat less one day and more the other day? I mean, that's really what it is in my opinion and how I would use it. And so it's a tool. It's certainly a tool, but it doesn't have to. I'm more like I'm a rebel, people. Like, I'm like, well, I just want to design every day myself. Can I just design every day myself? And I don't want to fit, like, I don't want to be like, oh no, I was 32 grams of fat and I'm only supposed to be 30. Like, it's just my personality. If I'm like, I'm going to be 40 and tomorrow I'll be 40 instead of 30, it's like, and so it's like, rather than like, I have to be 30 over here, but 50 over here, I'm like, can I just be about 40? That seems to work for, that's me. I'm that person. And so it depends what kind of person you are. So I'm not against them used in that very occasional way. I don't think there's a problem with that. Um, anyway, so that's where I stand. So if you wondered, because I got that question, I thought I would answer it. So let me go up. Um, Docs and Gal said, I'm in Eric's Westman's mode of not exercising to lose weight. I know, good for me. However, in the I will someday, I did lose all my weight with exercise. Let me clarify something, Docs and Gal, which is I don't exercise for weight loss. I do not exercise for weight loss. I do not lift weights for weight loss. I lift weights to gain muscle. Um, Ultimately, if you don't lift weights or do resistance training as you age, you will be sorry one day. Very sorry. Now, that lifting weights could be like I haul big sacks of potting soil around my garden, so I've got arm muscles and I can get myself up and down, and I'm not sarcopenic, my muscles are not going away. Especially women, as we approach menopause and postmenopausally, we lose muscle mass. And this is the number one reason that elderly people end up needing to be put in a home. It's not because they're in terrible health. It's because they are so unfit at a certain point. Even if they're not fat, you can be skinny. A lot of people with this problem are skinny. But you've lost too much muscle mass and you can't get out of your chair yourself. You can't get off the toilet yourself. You need help up stairs. And when you're that fragile, you can't live alone. And I would like that to never happen to me. And so it's really important to me that I do resistance training. And it also increases your metabolic rate. So I do not exercise to burn calories. Mm-mm. Trying to exercise to like burn calories, terrible, terrible idea. I think it's important to exercise. I used to be in that group, Docs and Gal, where I was like, well, I'm so glad I don't need to exercise to lose weight on this keto diet. And then one day I was like, think I'm fooling myself that I don't need to exercise. I don't need to exercise to lose weight, but is losing weight really my ultimate primary goal at a certain point? When I was almost 300 pounds, well, yeah. And now I'm like, oh, my primary goal is to be an old, healthy person, not a young, dead person. Right. Like I was like, oh, I have more goals. It's not, I mean, I would love to look amazing, but it's more to be like, I can open the jar of pickles and I can get myself in and out of the car and, like these very low to the ground cars. I'm still like, wow, why is this so low? Right. And I can, carry 10 bags of groceries from the basement if I need to. Right. Like I can be functional. If I go on a trip, I can put my own overhead bag in the, in the top and not worry when I have to pull it out and there are people around me. Am I going to drop this on somebody? And I don't have to ask somebody to help me. I want to be the 80-year-old that can do that. And if I don't start now at 45, I'm not going to be that 80-year-old. So yeah, so that's why I believe in it. It's not about burning calories. It's about being healthy. And the best thing we can do in that is lifting some weights. Yay, Helene ate her protein. Good job. Joy said, I do the PE diet from Dr. Ted Naiman. What do you think of his plan? Since working out more on keto wasn't cutting it, mostly higher protein, I'm going to be strong in my 80s. So the PE diet, I'll explain to people that don't know. So you can think of it like, you've probably heard this explained, that protein is for structure. When we eat protein, it's to maintain our lean body mass. It's to regenerate cells. We use protein for all of that. We're going to need protein. So protein is mostly structural. We can extract energy from protein, but it's much harder. And so it's primarily a structural element. Whereas fat and carbs are the two macronutrients that give us energy. So the PE diet is the protein to energy diet. So, while on keto, the idea is we keep our carbs super duper low and then we use all fat for energy. The PE diet doesn't really care if it's fat or protein so much as what's the ratio between fat and protein calories and to the protein amount. So protein to fat and carbs, which is the energy portion. And given that fat is higher energy, more calories per gram, including some carbs on the energy side can be useful for him. Now, Ted, I know, recommends, and I think very smartly, that those carbs aren't necessarily, it's not like bread and pasta and all that. It's like strawberries and um, things that you can get really high volume in, leafy greens. So, like, what I would think of as like the kind of carbs that I tend to suggest when I suggest carbs. So, it's fruits and vegetables and maybe some, I'm not saying it excludes all, I don't think it excludes grains, but it doesn't depend on them primarily. I am a big fan of the PE diet, to cut to the chase. Um, I think that once people get out of a place now, let me tell you my history. I did Ted Naiman's 3-to-1 plan way back in the day, which is basically, for me at the time, it was eating 65 grams of fat and no, 55 grams of fat and 165 grams of protein, which at the time felt nutty because I was at the time very, very keto and doing very high, like high fat, moderate protein. My protein at the time was probably about 100 grams. And it didn't go well for me at the time. I didn't feel well. I didn't like it. I wasn't losing a lot of weight. I felt kind of depressed, my brain wasn't working right, but I will say it's very close to the way that I eat now. So I think different strokes, different folks, different times. I think it works better for people that are metabolically healthier. Now that I'm metabolically healthy, the PE ratio works great for me. Whereas when I was very insulin resistant and suffering more mental health issues, I needed a higher fat approach. So I think probably what you did is which is similar to what I did, right? Started on full out keto at a certain point when weight loss stalled, start to look at other things. You've lost weight at that point, you're metabolically healthy, maybe you have some more goals, switching to a higher protein, maybe a little more liberal on the carbs, lower fat works for a lot of people. So I totally support it for the people that want to go there and that it's right for. Kim says, Mobility is vital. I've been an RN for a decade, and absolutely we need to keep muscle and mobility. Cindy and Lisa exercises for her heart. Good job, Cindy. Um, what are your thoughts on the variety of ancestral supplements and their effectiveness, i.e., the beef thyroid supplement for thyroid issues or beef lung for thyroid? Yeah, the idea that if you have a problem with an organ, taking that organ might help that organ. I don't know that that's actually supported in any way. The thyroid, maybe, because essentially, if you don't have enough thyroid, if you eat some desiccated thyroid, I mean, that will help supplement your thyroid. The problem with using something like an ancestral supplement rather than uh, prescription medication is you cannot dial in the dose with a supplement. There's no one certifying exactly how much, how strong, how efficacious that thyroid in that supplement is. So if you are significantly thyroid deficient and you're trying to depend on a very iffy, I'm not saying it's like an iffy quality, but an iffy dosed supplement, all supplements are certainly going to be iffier than a prescription, right? There's just not the oversight on those things. I would worry. Myself, I have thyroid issues. I take Armour Thyroid, which is a natural desiccated thyroid hormone. I wouldn't want to take a over-the-counter thyroid supplement. I wouldn't want to do that instead. I would be too worried that I wasn't getting enough, and not getting enough thyroid hormone when you're hypothyroid is a problem. That being said, if there was some reason I couldn't take like the world's supply of Armour Thyroid and all prescription thyroid medications ran out and we had to do something, I would then perhaps take the supplement from someplace like Ancestral Supplements because it would be my only option. But as long as there's a better option, I think I want the better option. I don't believe though that lung makes your lung healthier or adrenals makes your adrenal. I don't necessarily think that that is true. Or brain makes you smarter. I think that these various organs, though, do have vitamins and minerals that are going to be very good for us. Like beef liver has a lot of things, vitamin C and all sorts of things. So important. All right, Dachshund and Gal, I guilted you. So maybe that'll do something. Um, Yvonne says, I did a 3-day juice veggie cleanse. It got me restarted. No sugar cravings or diet pop cravings. Not a big fan of juice cleanses myself, but it worked for you. Good job, Yvonne. Glad you found something that worked for you. I'm always happy for people's success, even if I would never recommend the thing they did to get success. Ethel says, what are your thoughts on oxalate dumping when eating carnivore? I would say that it seems to be something that happens to some people. I'm not it's certainly not my field. I do not seem to have oxalate issues. I certainly see it reported quite a bit. I do think it can be mitigated a bit if you're concerned about it by including a lot of sources of calcium, because calcium can sequester oxalate. And also, as Sally Norton, who's probably the oxalate expert that I know anyway, would suggest is you maybe don't. So you say when going carnivore, she would say, don't go full bore all at once. Go in a modified fashion. So don't stop eating the foods with oxalates in them completely. Just eat less of them. So but I would say if I were wanting to go carnivore and I was worried about oxalate dumping, I don't think it's as big a thing as people. It's one of those things where everyone's very concerned about it. I think the number of people that are actually experiencing oxalate dumping is probably less than a lot of people think they might. It's not that common, but it does happen. And so if I were like, I really want to be carnivore and I'm worried about oxalate dumping, I would probably include quite a bit of high calcium foods like Greek yogurt, maybe even sardines. They have a lot of calcium because of the bones, like bone-in sardines. Is there bone-out sardines? I don't know. I don't eat sardines, but those have a lot of, the bone little fish that come with the bones. Those have those bones. They have calcium. So a higher calcium intake can be helpful to sequester the oxalates if you have an oxalate issue. But if you don't have an oxalate issue, I don't know that you need to do that, and I don't know if you have an oxalate issue. So ultimately, I think it's not as common as some people would suggest it is, but I certainly don't want to suggest it does not exist because it seems to. Ken says he ate some things today that he shouldn't have eaten, and he hopes it doesn't cause more gout. I hope so too, Ken. Karen's, what is an oxalate? Helene asked. Okay, so there is something in plants. It doesn't really exist in animal products, but there's something called oxalic acid. Oxalic acid is just what is it? It's an acid. It exists in high quantities in certain seeds, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. And some people get and then oxalates, so oxalic acid form oxalates, and oxalates can do things like crystallize. And so some people, actually, speaking of gout, will have something where maybe oxalate crystals form in their joints, and it can be mistaken for gout, but it's actually that these oxalates have formed sort of crystal-like structures in the joints, and then they're painful. And so, if you're interested in oxalates, probably Sally K. Norton is the person who I've heard talk about them the most with the most information. Um, it's not something that everyone deals with. It's not a problem for a lot of people, but it is a problem for some people. And so, if you think that is you that are having oxalate issues, foods that are highest in oxalates, as far as I know, almonds are very high in oxalates, but like coconut is not. Chocolate is very high. Coffee is very high. Certain types of teas, I think, are high. I know rhubarb is very high. And then certain leafy greens, I think spinach is very high. But then certain things you can do, like if you boil spinach and then you drain off the liquid, you've lowered a lot of oxalate. So a lot of high oxalate foods are easily or you can reduce the amount of oxalate by cooking them and then draining them. Karen said it's the plant's defense system. Yeah. So oxalic acid is one of the, plants defend themselves from being eaten, right, by pests. It's like their version of pest control. And so some people are affected by oxalic acid. Now, there seems to be a lot of variation. So some people seem very responsive. So it's like oxalic acid is toxic. You can kill every person with oxalates. So I'm not saying it's not a substance of concern. However, we all have a tolerance for oxalates. That's just human. Like we can deal with oxalates. However, it seems like it varies from person to person, and some people have a very low, like it's like what's the poisonous dose? Some people it's super high, so they're never going to get close to having an issue with oxalates. And then for other people, their tolerance is very, very low, and it's sort of a cumulative issue. So, so if you're, I remember. Sorry, guys, I'm thirsty. I remember Sally telling the story about, I think it was something like every rhubarb season she'd be sick because rhubarb is apparently very high in oxalates, and she would never understand it because she would eat and then she'd feel better because it's a short season, things like that. So I'm not the world's expert, as I said, on oxalates, but if you are concerned about them, then you can look at Sally Norton's thing. But please, please always be aware um, about the possibility, if you're a hypochondriac like I am, or a person with any anxiety, the more you read about various problems, health problems, the more health problems you think you have. I'll just put it that way, right? So be aware that the oxalates are a problem for some people, not all people. There you go. Tracy says, can you explain the difference between nutritional? Oh, I missed one. Tracy, I'll come back to your question. Karen says, after 3 years, I fell off the wagon. Tips to get back. Karen, you have to decide to get back to it. You have to get the stuff out of your house that you don't want in your house. You have to remember, because a lot of people do this. They're like, well, I'll eat the bag of marshmallows and then I won't buy any more marshmallows. Don't eat the bag of throw them out. They're doing you no purpose. They're not high nutrition foods. Don't make yourself the garbage can. Use the garbage can. Throw them away. Don't eat them. Don't buy any more. Don't go anywhere where you're going to be tempted to eat these things for a little bit. Get yourself over the hump. Eat lots of bacon, eggs, ribeye, bunless burgers. Don't restrict your food quantities for a while. Restrict your food types. And then within a week or two, you will be back on the wagon. Let's see. Tracy said, can you explain the difference between nutritional ketosis and therapeutic ketosis? Sort of. So there is this thing called ketosis. Ketosis is simply the state. So being in ketosis is the state of having measurable ketones in your blood and your body, right? And so there are different levels of ketosis, and they will often refer to having higher levels of ketones as being therapeutic ketosis rather than nutritional ketosis. Nutritional ketosis, but nutritional, in my mind, nutritional ketosis is sort of is almost the same thing as ketosis. It's just saying eating in such a way to produce ketones. You can also supplement yourself into ketosis using things like ketone esters or ketone salts, but those are very short lived. And so I don't really consider those the ketogenic diet, right? Those are supplements. So once you have measurable ketones, it's sort of defined as around 0.5 millimolar of beta hydroxybutyrate in your blood. That's the concentration of that type of ketone. You're considered in nutritional ketosis. And then I think it's the cutoff is around 3. I think it's 3.0. It might be a little lower, but I think that these were kind of, they're in a way somebody just Finney and Volek just sort of threw some distinctions in there, but above what you would kind of normally see people's blood ketones at. Now, sometimes when people start ketosis, start the ketogenic diet, their blood ketones might be kind of high. Some people just seem to like just go stratospheric with their blood ketones. Not everybody. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of an individual thing at the beginning, but then they kind of level out. But I think I would probably say nutritional ketosis just means being in ketosis through your diet. And then therapeutic ketosis means sort of focusing on having higher ketones while in ketosis. And the reason it's called therapeutic is more often those high level of ketones are used in the treatment of something. So it's not just wanting to be in ketosis for performance or mental acuity or just for like normal folk things, fat loss, whatever. It's for people with cancer, neurodegenerative illnesses, for uh, epilepsy, that kind of thing. Those people try to be more in what is called therapeutic ketosis level, which just means higher ketones. Generally speaking, those people might have to eat a little less protein and a little more fat because that can ramp up ketones. You can also ramp up ketones through the use of things like MCT oil, because MCT oil, which is medium chain triglycerides, um, bypass the liver and well, actually, no, sorry, they bypass digestion and go directly to the liver. Said that backwards. Where they're processed and turned into ketones right away. So they're available for energy very quickly. And so they bump ketones up a lot more than other types of fats. Hopefully that answered your question. Linda B, does eating keto cause hair loss, or should I chalk it up to menopause? Any suggestions to stop the hair loss? So I'm a 2 drinker girl. I got water, I got coffee. Um, uh, any severe weight loss will cause hair loss. So your body decides when you are losing significant body fat, because your body is ancient. I don't mean you're old. I mean, the wisdom of your body is ancient, and it has no idea why anyone would ever go on a diet to lose body fat, because back in the day, nobody ever wanted to go on a diet because body fat was your protection against dying next winter. Um, so it assumes there's a crisis, and hair is not a necessity compared to your heart beating. And so it will not prioritize hair regrowth when you're in a significant fat loss phase. This will self-resolve, stop losing so much weight, and your hair will grow back in. Hair grows in about a 3-month cycle, which means it might take a couple months. Well, so it's like a couple months after you start a diet, you notice, I don't have a lot of hair, and then it'll take a couple months to resolve once you stabilize. That's just any type of rapid fat loss. If someone is eating too low protein on a ketogenic diet, they also can have hair loss, because low protein can cause hair loss. So if you're not getting enough protein, hair requires protein. So you'd want to up that. So what would I suggest to stop the loss? And then you're right, menopause. Hair falls out with hormone fluctuation, especially progesterone. So I would get a full hormone panel to see what your um, sex hormones are doing. I would also get a thyroid panel, because having low thyroid function will also cause hair loss. So I would, one, make sure you're eating enough protein. 2, make sure that your thyroid is functioning properly. 3, make sure your sex hormones are functioning properly. And then, you reference iodine. Iodine would be connected to the thyroid, because if you don't have enough iodine, your thyroid can't function properly. So if you find out if your thyroid is not functioning properly, then it might be a reason to supplement iodine. I certainly don't think there's any downside to supplementing a little bit of iodine. A good multivitamin like Thorne AM PM is going to include iodine, as well as many other vitamins and minerals. So if you want to cover your bases, you could do something like that. Dusty, sorry. Dusty said, went to the eye doctor today, had a nice discussion about keto and carnivore. She told me leafy green vegetables to prevent macular degeneration. What have you heard on this? Yes, I had a discussion with my eye doctor about this a couple of years ago. He loves keto. He was very pro keto. I am what do they call it? When I had my like 23andMe done, I show up that I potentially have a biological tendency towards macular degeneration, so that I should be aware of that as I'm aging. And leafy greens definitely can be helpful, supposedly. That being said, they can be helpful in the only population that's been tested, is a population that isn't eating a ketogenic diet. but he said there's a supplement called Areds, AREDS2, that would be very helpful if you're concerned about that. But yes, there's seems to be evidence that increased leafy green consumption can be helpfully protective with something like macular degeneration. And the vitamin on the market that can be very helpful is called Areds 2. Um, I eat leafy greens. I don't think much about it. When I've talked to people about it with carnivore, the answer many times is, well, we don't really honestly know. There's not a huge population of carnivore people to study out there. It may very well be that on carnivore, because you're not eating the grains and nuts and or, the seeds and nuts and grains and these other things, that you may have lower inflammation and other things may happen. Right? We don't know. It's kind of a question mark. If you're worried about it, and if you think it would be a good idea to include some leafy greens, then include some leafy greens. Joy, thank you. Your skin looks lovely. I have a constellation of little red dots right here because I'm have that hormonal issue right now, but I appreciate the feedback. I use something called the I did a live with the founder of the company the other day. The line of skincare I use is called Alitura, Alitura, Alitura. It's very good stuff. It calms my skin down. It's not perfect all the time, but it is really pretty good. And I love the skincare line. So I use Alitura, and then I kind of like the foundation I use a lot. It's actually a pretty good foundation. What is it? I forget what foundation it is. Um, I will put the brand of foundation I use in the notes afterwards because I think it does a really good job of evening everything out really well without looking cakey. Um, Exchange student says, I've always wondered if being, by the way, I'm a fidgeter, so I've got like a hairband on. Sorry if it's bothering anybody. I can't stop. Um, I've always wondered if being keto and fasting a lot would affect breathalyzer tests. Should I ever get over? Do I need to refuse it? So it kind of here's on a cheap breathalyzer, you will show acetone, which will show up on their test and potentially be an issue. However, as far as I've been informed, because I have looked into this before, almost every um, uh, police department, precinct, what am I looking for? Um, it uses better quality breathalyzers than a cheap acetone meter, and so they actually can tell the difference, is what I've heard. That being said, um, well, first I would say don't drive like an idiot. So don't get pulled over for erratic driving. That would be my first bit of advice. The likelihood that you'll be given a breathalyzer test in most cases, if you're not driving like an idiot, is low. So it's probably an issue you don't have to worry about that much. Say, though, there's something like uh, I've only seen this once, but apparently they sometimes set up a place where, like on 4th of July or something, they pull a certain number of cars over and give a certain those people breathalyzers. And I would just, because I'm a cautious sort, would say, I'm fasting. I'm gonna so my breath has acetone in it. I would rather get a blood test if you think that's going to be an issue. Just common sense advice. Have a discussion with them, and then you can see what they say. Forewarned is forearmed. So I would have that discussion up front and say, I know that I'm producing acetone because I'm fasting. It's just a byproduct. I haven't had any alcohol at all. But if that's going to be concerned with your meter, is there another way that I can be tested? Um, because there is going to be a byproduct of acetone in my breath. But I have been told that it was only the crappy meters that it was a problem with. So, all right. Hazil says, "Hi Kim, when you were in ketosis and then become anabolic, what does it make? Does it take you out of ketosis?" So, no. So I will give some term summaries for people that maybe don't know the term anabolic. So there are different states that your body can be in at different times, and different parts of your body can be in different states at the same time. But there's anabolic, which means growth, and there's catabolic, which means breakdown. So anabolic, catabolic. When we're in there, and you can look at like the function of the liver, or rather the function of the pancreas, not the sole function, but the pancreas has some things going on in it, right? Where we're um, sort of negotiating energy through what the pancreas is doing. So, in a fed state, when we've eaten a lot of carbs, our body produces more insulin, and insulin is considered an anabolic hormone, although some would say it's not as much anabolic as it is anti-catabolic. Whereas the opposite, when you're in a low insulin state, you might be more often in a higher glucagon ratio. Glucagon also produced by the pancreas. Insulin and glucagon sort of are on a little bit of a seesaw with each other about anabolic, catabolic. So when you're in more of a glucagon producing state, you are in more of a catabolic state. Catabolic is breakdown. So it's the breakdown of fatty acids for energy. It's so you can think of that about loss, breakdown, lipolysis, losing fat, that kind of thing. More catabolic, losing muscle, catabolic. Right? So anabolic, catabolic, and then there's anti-catabolic, which is kind of in the middle, where it's like you're maybe not growing, right? Anabolic growth, and you're not fully catabolic, but you're kind of hovering in that mid space. So your teeter totter is level. That's more anti-catabolic, right? So while it is true, when you produce insulin, which again is often more anabolic, in higher insulin states, that is indeed anti-ketone. What am I like the conjugating these words is hard sometimes. It is more anti-ketogenic. That's what I was trying to say. So if you start producing too much insulin, you will totally drop your ketones. So yes, but I don't know what you mean. Are you talking about anabolic in terms of insulin production? If you produce too much insulin, you will absolutely um, reduce your ketone level. But if you're talking about like, a lot of people will talk about anabolic in terms of like bodybuilding or weightlifting. Weightlifting specifically will not cause a problem to being in ketosis. So I'm kind of wondering what the underlying thing you're asking about. Is it insulin specifically? Because yes. Actually, if you are producing a ton of ketones, if your ketones start rising, going above 2, 3, as they start creeping up, it actually triggers insulin. So because insulin manages ketones, it keeps them from going too high. So you could be not eating carbs, but your ketones start going up, you're gonna create a little bit of insulin to sort of manage to teeter totter those ketones down. There you go. Amy says, I've been keto for a year. My A1C went from 4.6 to 4.8. I know that is good, but why is it going in the wrong direction? I don't think it's going in the wrong. I mean, I don't think anything's going wrong. And I know you're saying, yeah, both numbers are good. 4.6 is very low. 4.8 is very low. The difference between 4.6 and 4.8, it's not much. And it's like splitting hairs a little bit. Now, if you said I went from 4.6 to 5.6, I would say, well, that's probably a problem. But what will happen to people often when they're in a low insulin state for a long period of time is, in fact, the body becomes more and more glucose. The muscles and certain parts of your body become more glucose refusing, which means there might be a little more glucose in the bloodstream, which would mean something like an A1C might go up, which mean your average glucose is higher in your bloodstream, but that's because your muscles and organs are feeding off of fatty acids. It's like the inn is full and they don't need the glucose as much. They're doing very well without it. There's just more circulating in your bloodstream now. You're still in a very healthy level. I wouldn't consider that a wrong direction. I would say your body is just doing what bodies do, which is adjusting to the state you're in. We don't want to have zero insulin. I'm sorry. We don't want to have a blood glucose of zero. We also don't want to have zero insulin. We want an appropriate amount of glucose, which you have. Okay. I have come to the end of my questions. Does anyone have anything they want me to clarify? I know I used a lot of words tonight. I'm happy to answer a few more or clarify something, or if you have a personal thing you want to ask, or something going on you want to talk about, something you want to ask me about in life, I'll see if I can answer it. My opinion on allulose. So allulose is a rare sugar. It is often made from corn. So if you're really allergic to corn, you might not want to use it. I don't think it has to be made from corn, but I think it ends up being made from corn a lot. Allulose is basically sweet. It's used as a sweetener. They've done studies on it mostly in Asia, and those studies seem to indicate that it does not raise insulin significantly. It may be beneficial. One of the interesting things, and I'm going to use very vague terms on this because I can't remember exactly what it does, but for people on non-ketogenic diets, so somebody who ingest carbs, so say you made a bowl of oatmeal, not that any of us make bowls of oatmeal, but if you made a bowl of oatmeal, and you sprinkled allulose on top of it, and you fed it to someone who is a carb eater, their glucose would not go up as much as somebody without the allulose. And so the initial thought on that is like, oh, well, does that mean it's raising somebody's insulin more? And the answer is actually no. Again, this is where I'm going to get vague with the science because it's been so long since I read this paper. But it, I think, has a type of glucose block in it, essentially. Now, it won't mean that it'll take that oatmeal down to zero, but it will raise your blood sugar less than without the allulose because it blocks some of the glucose absorption from, or the sugar absorption from the sweet food that you ate it with. But for those of us on keto, it doesn't really matter because we're not eating oatmeal or anything carby. So, but it's kind of an interesting thing for people who do eat carbs. I've heard stories of people putting allulose-based syrup on pancakes for their kids to try and mitigate some of the pancake damage. I would just make better pancakes out of things that I make pancakes out of. But it's an interesting point anyway. So I was skeptical about allulose because it's new, and when things are new, I'm like, I don't know yet. We don't have a lot of data, but all the data on allulose I've seen has been good. I find it a little more troublesome to bake with. It turns things very brown because it is it the Maillard reaction that it causes? I don't know, but it makes everything very brown. So if you don't want your baked goods browner than you expect them to be, it's a problem. It's also not quite as sweet as some of the other things that I use. So you have to use more of it than you think you do. Like if you've gotten used to using Swerve as your baked good, you have to use more. And but it is smoother. So if I'm making like a custard or something that has a texture that's going to get gritty from erythritol, then I probably would go to allulose. But if for baking, I tend to still like Swerve. It's sort of my old trusted one. But also there's one called Boca Sweet, which is made from kombucha squash, which to me is probably I like better than allulose just in terms of the way that it bakes and the function and the taste. But in terms of the health benefits and or not health problems, I now feel comfortable enough to say I give it a thumbs up to allulose. To answer, hopefully that answers your question. Cindy said, my A1C is 5.6 on keto for 2 years. Should it be lower? I would want it to be lower. I'm pretty much happy with anything under a 5.4, but above 5.4, you're averaging a blood glucose, it's a little higher than I would really want you to be. It's 5.6 is not, again, I'm not a doctor. This is my personal opinion, not medical advice. But I do know when you're above 5.4, you're no, you're spiking into levels of higher glucose every once in a while than I like. So I would rather it be a little lower. And the way, so, and then I also like to say that it's not always about the food. So we got another question, which is, will stress raise your blood sugar? Yes, stress can raise your blood sugar a lot. Lack of sleep, sleep apnea, stress, those all will raise blood sugar significantly. So it might not be the food you're eating. It may be the life you're living that's keeping your blood sugar higher than you want it to be. But exercise is fabulous for lowering blood sugar. If you deplete some of your muscle glycogen, so your muscles store glucose, and when you exercise, you use up some of that glycogen and then it sucks more glucose into your muscles so that because it wants to be full all the time. Your muscles never want to be empty. And so it will pull more glucose out of your bloodstream if you exercise. They have actually found that taking a 10-minute walk after each meal is as effective as taking metformin for some people in terms of keeping blood sugars in an appropriate range. So I would definitely it doesn't have to be a hard walk, but walking more can help with blood sugar significantly. Jen says, what kind of blood sugar substitutes do you think what I should slow down. What kind of sugar substitutes do you think will raise blood sugar the least? Most sugar substitutes should not raise your blood sugar really at all. I would certainly avoid maltitol. That will raise your blood sugar. I would, if you're very sensitive, you might have a small response from xylitol, but erythritol, allulose, stevia. I mean, even the artificial sweeteners like like aspartame and sucralose shouldn't raise your blood sugar. Now, in the packet form, like so as not aspartame, but equal or Splenda, not sucralose, those add fillers to the packets that are things like dextrose or maltodextrin. Those will raise your blood sugar. But the artificial sweetener or the keto sweetener, those sweeteners themselves, the popular ones really don't raise blood sugar in most people, but random things raise blood sugar in some people. So, test, see what goes on for you. Tracy said, what is the stevia glycerite versus liquid stevia? Stevia, your pumpkin pancake recipe calls for it. Stevia glycerite is a combination of stevia and glycerin. Stevia liquid is just stevia. So I say, and I got this from Maria Emmerich, she uses it. Stevia glycerite is the best. It's so awesome. I keep it in my cabinet all the time. I put a drop or two in my yogurt when I want my yogurt sweeter. And I don't use it like as a primary sweetener in something, but I use it as a secondary sweetener. So if I'm making a cake, I'll do mostly erythritol, but I add a few drops of stevia glycerite. I use it in like yogurt, I just use the stevia glyceride, but it's fabulous. It rounds out the sweet flavor. It makes things taste more like they taste like sugar instead of fake sugar. So it'll last you a very long time. Get a jar on Amazon of stevia glycerite and make sure the word glycerite is on the jar and not just liquid stevia. Different. Liquid stevia is the texture of water. Stevia glycerite is the texture of glycerin, which is sort of the texture of less sticky honey. It's thicker and it's less bitter than regular stevia by a long shot. Because regular stevia is pretty bitter. It debitters the stevia because glycerin is naturally sweet in and of itself. Okay, I think we've come to the end of our questions. So I appreciate you guys being here with me this week. And I will see you next week where hopefully I will stop being quite such a crazy person on Tuesday before the call. All right. Bye, guys.